Listen, I just have to cover my heart like they do in the Middle East. Honor. It's about honor.
Uh, yeah, so wow,
Right?
man.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good
Make
to
sure
see
you
you,
don't
Ryan.
edit that out. Don't edit that out, Lee. You saw that
Man.
love there? You see that
Good,
love?
man.
No, no, no. We'll do the redo. We'll do the redo.
Yeah,
We'll do the redo
that's
of
cool.
love.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
man. Ryan, so
all right.
good to see you from
Mm.
Dubai. Salute.
Yeah, actually,
Everybody
right
has
now
a
I'm in
drink.
Abu
Why
Dhabi.
not? Should I have a drink? So
Yeah.
Sophie and I are drinking the same thing.
yeah, I don't have a drink. I don't have a drink. All right, let's pop it off. Um, episode 7, Pod with Perspective. We have a special guest today, Brother
Yes.
Ryan Yates, all the way from
Yes.
Alexandria straight to Dubai.
Dubai.
Please, sir, give us a rundown, quick bio, where you're at, what
Yeah.
you're doing, how you doing it.
Yeah. Well, let's make sure we give the people enough information to know that like we're family. Lee and I, we
Always.
spent a lot of time overnight shift working together as mental health technicians, and only reason that happened was because of Luke. You know,
This is
Luke was
very
the
true.
VP of my university when I was there. Instrumental in my time there. Somebody I always look to for advice. Somebody I did even after school. So, and then Soph and I spent time at the university together simultaneously. And I also was there with Serena. So it's a family affair. For me, it's
Absolutely.
a conversation. Lee and I spent hours and hours and hours debating on those overnight shifts. So this is just something that I needed. For me, right now, I'm actually in Abu Dhabi. I took a little hour trip down from Dubai, and I've been staying here for a while. But I'm in the UAE, the
Okay.
marketing director for a basketball brand that I'm building up, basketball company that I'm building up with what I call my OG and my high school coach and like a father figure for me, and
Good.
our investor from Kuwait. So we're out here, kind of an international entrepreneurship thing. Um, it's been probably the craziest transition from where I was in grad school. And you guys know when I was working at the mental health institution, I was also trying to build a business with a teammate of mine. So
Right.
I was teaching on campus, and I was part of different organizations and all these other different things. So this is an expansion on that, but with a little bit more spice to it, so to
Let,
speak.
let, let me interject just a moment
Yeah.
and give
Mhm.
just I want Yates here, Mr. Yates, to see himself through my lens, okay, for just a
Uh-oh.
second.
Talk to
So I
me, Luke.
remember when Ryan came in as a freshman to play basketball, right? He's 6 foot, what are you, 7, 6'8", 7?
Yeah.
Am I
We'll
close?
go 6'7". We'll go
All right,
6'7".
6'7", that's fair.
Yeah.
So there was a difference between Ryan and the other like 13, 14 players on the team. Ryan, I watched him over time, and this brother caught my attention because he looked out for the little people. And when I say the little people, the people that are invisible to a lot of society. And some of those people work in the cafeteria, they're doing the dishes, they're doing the cooking or the cleaning. I would see Ryan put his tray down, go back behind the lunch line. I'm not even sure he was allowed to be back there without a hairnet or something. But he'd go back. These little 70, 80-year-old women that are cooking back there, he'd give them hugs. They loved him, man. They loved him. And I recognize there's something different about Ryan, the fact that he sees these folks. It might be at a basketball game. He might see somebody in a wheelchair or that's disabled that comes to every game. Ryan always paid his respects. So that's number one. Number two, I've got to say is that he was always an entrepreneur, thinking about how can I create something. He had this creative mind. And so whether it was a clothing line or, he was always trying to create something. And then it didn't even surprise me when all of a sudden, out of the blue for me, he goes, I'm going to Dubai. I'm going to the Middle East to live, like not to visit, to live. I know Dubai is like the Vegas of the Middle East. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah,
because when I was in
yeah.
Saudi, everybody takes off the hijab on the plane to Dubai because they're going to let loose, right? So
Yeah,
I know
it's a
what
little
time it
bit.
is in Dubai.
Yeah,
But you
yeah.
went to live and do entrepreneurial work, and it's just and then number 3, just service. You've worked with those less fortunate, those with mental illness, those
Yeah,
who have
yeah.
been plagued by disability for a good
Mhm,
portion of your life. And when you
mhm.
could have just stayed in academia, they already had recruited you to be a professor, a young professor, go on to
Yeah,
grad school,
yeah.
etc. And but you were always given to people. So much love, much honor. What a pleasure to have you on today, really.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And you were one of the. There are a handful of people. Deanna is one of them too. That gave me enough confidence to be able to say, you have your own space here, and
Yeah,
if it's not here, you can create it yourself. So
do it,
don't look for anyone else to give you
do
any
it.
validation. So, as you guys know,
Wow.
my time on campus was tailor made for me. I did things the way found fit for me. So,
Good for
and
you.
that's because a lot of you guys gave you that push. So,
Very
you know,
proud.
we're here now. We're here
That's
now.
it.
Though.
That's it.
No, you look great, Slim.
Hey, thanks, man.
Yeah,
Thanks, man.
you look great, man. You know, it's always
Yeah,
good to
yeah,
see you. I for
yeah.
one was a little shocked. I didn't want you to go just yet.
I know, I know.
But
We were getting
you
into
know,
some
you had
things.
to break it to me because it was. I remember your struggles a little bit as a designer, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
fun to watch for real, man. You know, that
Mhm.
process. You know, the trial and error. Um, you know, kind of breaking the ties of friendships and you know old business relationships and just going for self. And it's
Yeah.
that's like you know watching the butterfly just just kind of come into its own, man. It's beautiful. It's good to see
So,
you, bro.
Yeah,
Let's do a
absolutely.
quick wellness check. How's everyone
yeah.
doing? You know, how's your hearts? How's your minds? You know, how's your
Mm.
bodies? Start with Soph.
Yeah.
Ladies first.
Gosh, I mean, considering all that's going on, I'd say doing pretty well, getting situated in the new crib,
Mm,
working
mm,
out
mm, mm.
every day, but yesterday this week. So new things in the new place. That's been helping with you know handling stress of not having a job and
Yeah.
just navigating everything that's going on.
Hey, have you noticed that you said that 3 times since we've
Uh,
been on?
But
It's
everything
an anxiety that you have
it
that's not
is,
having a
it is.
job.
yeah.
No,
I'm
it's
gonna speak to. I'm gonna say something to it too.
yeah, no,
Yeah, I
and
know. I know that feeling.
I think I've
Mhm.
been waiting for this podcast so that I can kind of be
Yeah.
able to discuss these things and Fraser and I have these conversations, but it's usually the same one over and over again, and I'm tired of having them, but they need to happen. So I don't know where you guys at.
What's up, Doc? Where you at, man? How's your
What
head?
I tell you, no, Friday was amazing. I had the opportunity to travel down and see Sophia in Richmond. And, first of all, I had to get over the fact that she lives in a place that's nicer than I've ever lived in my life. And so, but she didn't act too bougie and all that. It was okay.
You had to get over it. Why is that? Why
Well,
get
it's just,
over it?
it's hard when they start out as at a better place than where you're at
Isn't
after.
that by design? Isn't that by design? Isn't that
No,
why we
Let-
do what we do as
mm-mm.
parents? No.
No, no, you pay the piper, man. I want my kid, you pay the
Oh,
piper.
you want her in shelter and tuna first.
That's
Okay.
it, and then you learn to
She lived in a
appreciate it
house with
Did.
like
later on.
12 other individuals.
That's true. No,
Who
I got to
didn't do
get it.
that?
No, but more importantly, she took she took us down to Monument. This is interesting. What's it called? Monument Drive or Monument? The fan of Richmond, right?
Mhm.
And you have that Monument Park or Monument Drive, where like every block you've got a Southern Confederate leader, that they're paying homage to, and it was just fascinating to see. This is the first time where I saw vandalism as art, like it was a beautiful mosaic of people's expression on these symbols, right? That represent a time of that wasn't very good to blacks in America.
What did
And
that do for your soul?
no,
How did
it
that
was
wake
like,
something up in you?
it was just so, there was something, you say it well, Lee, like it was welling up inside. Like I felt this kind of like I'm a part of something. Like
Right.
I'm part of a movement, you know. And one of the things I thought was really interesting, the southern cry around the Confederate flag. I saw that NASCAR, you know, as an institution said you can no longer fly the Confederate flag at our events.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge step for a southern entity like NASCAR, knowing who
very
their
huge.
fan base is, to take away the Confederate flag. But you know, and the cry from these folks are, hey, it's our heritage. But I saw this post today, which was very educational. This whole Confederacy lasted 5 years. That's it. They're talking about their heritage. It's 5 years. I mean, are you kidding? I've worked in my current job longer, basically, than the entire Confederacy. So, you know, you know, I want to say some language, but I'm going to hold back.
No. But can I ask you a question? What do you think? See, because that's
Hold on, Lee.
interesting.
Lee, you didn't check
But I want to
in.
know. I'm going to get you,
That's
Yates.
a fire. You know, I'm talking about you. You got to check it too, because that's a fire. That might take the
Well,
minute
because I want to poke at him for just a sec, because I want
from one way to another.
Well, help me understand just with that 5-year piece, right? How do people hang on to something like that for generations?
And actually, it's
And
symbolic.
and before you get to me, I want to understand that. I gotta
No,
figure that out.
symbolically, what are you hanging on to, right? A way of life, a protection of the good old days when we were symbolically in power, like when it was
Power and privilege.
When it was overt, when we could hang a nigga in a tree, you know what I mean? And it's okay, you know, we're just gonna go on down. Are you kidding me? And people are hanging on to that as the good old days? Like, I don't understand. Yeah. Maybe it's more than that, but I'm looking through a lens.
Interesting, man.
As a hyphenated American, you know. And
what's interesting though is
it's a trip. 5 years.
When you talk about Confederate flag being a symbol of something for them to hold on to, essentially that's what being white is, right?
Right.
Because when we talk about, I think it might have been Du Bois, and I was reading a book and talk about when those who were considered the 1% started really getting nervous and making change, when they saw the poor whites and the poor blacks starting to collude and figure out that we're all being left out here. And so the power in those numbers is different, right?
Right. So you know what they did, right? So that's when they took those poor whites and made them overseers, right? Let me give you a little taste of you're not part of the aristocratic society, the rich and the wealthy, but let me give you a little step up above the Negro so that then you're more with us than you are with them, right?
Right. But in the end, only thing they're holding on to is the fact that they're white, but not understanding that everybody at that point is still being looked at as a pawn or somebody or able body to make me $1. That's why the 1% is the 1%.
That's right.
If you're a middle class white, if you're a poor white, if you're a white woman, you're still looked at the same exact way. So when that changes and understanding that race is a concept that's based from or is a part of the symptom from the disease of capitalism and everything else, and you see there's no difference between none of us. Trump, whoever else, still looks at the Shenandoah Valley white guys from wherever else that you just like them, but you know, there's more of you, so we can win with this.
So the importance, it was so important to brainwash America of this inferiority complex. You know, this kind of supremacy piece. And we had to have blacks actually believe that they were less than. And that has been passed on from generation to generation as well, that internalized oppression. But the reality is that was all purposeful in order to stratify and actually to not have rebellion, a peasant rebellion, so to speak, you know. Wow, man, you get me all juiced up already.
It's coming again, though. It's going to come again.
No,
You know,
this is the time right now.
yeah, that's why we lost Dr. King, because he started to talk about economics, and that was going to
Yep.
include everybody. So
The war on poverty. That's right.
yeah, here we go. That's coming again, though.
Ooh,
Yeah.
y'all.
So
What about you,
so
Lee?
So I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm really enjoying my weekend just home, for real. Just the little things, man. Making pancakes for my sons, and
Mm.
you know, just kind of being able to move on my own time a little bit, man. I forgot being out of work for those weeks, and even though it was a short stint, I really forgot what it felt like. Monday through Friday, at the mercy of someone else's time.
Yeah.
24/7. So just to have, I really was looking forward to Friday. And I said to my wife yesterday, I said, damn, I wish Saturday was Friday. She goes, why? I said, I just want just one more day. I just want another day. I felt like a kid in school, like,
Yeah.
the break's over. I got to go back Monday. And nothing against my job. It's just more so just what home feels like.
Yeah.
In regards to what's going on around us, my youngest brother is currently leaving Atlanta to come back to New York. And while he was in Atlanta, let me start by saying rest in peace to Rashard Brooks.
Yeah.
An incident happened Friday night
Absolutely.
where a young man was shot three times in the back of the head by Officer Garrett Rolfe from the Atlanta Police Department, I want to believe.
Yeah.
Is that the
That's
APD?
right. That's
Okay. Right. Currently, the Wendy's where this happened is now burnt, as it should be. And Wendy's is always pretty vocal on Twitter. Slim, you know that. So you know that they have so much clapback, and I have yet to see a tweet. So I'm just waiting for the Wendy's press release. But safe travels to my brother. Yeah, it might not happen because this is not about fries or burgers. This is about another senseless murder of a young black man.
Absolutely.
Looking at this brother hold his daughter, again, and I said, my mental space, guys, has been just filled with death as I'm trying to embrace new life, if that makes any sense.
Interesting. Yes, with Lewis.
It's a weird paradox for me right now, a little bit, because these are not things that I can ignore. I can't, I got to have the conversation with an 8-year-old. I got to talk to my kids at work about it, because whether they're in an institution, whether they're in home being quarantined, or whether they're out and about, they all have questions. They all want some kind of answer. And it's not the adults. I'm even talking to adults, I guess, who are
for sure.
playing as if they don't understand. They understand. They just always want the black perspective. So, I've kind of toned that down a little bit too. But overall, fellas, ladies, I'm good. I'm blessed to be here. Slim, I want to check in with you, man, because as we talk about all the things that are going on around us in the US of A, what does this look like for you on the other side of the world? What does this look like? What is your conversations with your family back home? What is your remembrance of things that have happened, and compare and contrast the level of treatment and how you can actually be successful in that space right now?
Well, for me, you guys know, especially you, Lee and Luke, my story is so unique, like in every aspect. First of all, just coming from America into UAE and Dubai and doing business, just take away the COVID situation and everything there. That in itself was a huge jump. Like I got here at the end of September, and I've been working every single day until maybe you've seen on my Instagram, I took like a 2 or 3 day trip. Like from the day I got here in October until like 2 or 3 days ago, I've been working nonstop. Like, entrepreneurial things to where there's really no time limit on when you do things. So I take care of the business side with my coaching partner, and then also take care of the basketball training side. So that's nonstop. So that's crazy because now I have to reimagine how business looks, because it's not capitalistic here.
Yeah.
It's different. So the way I talk, the way I work with people,
That's interesting.
that's
Capitalism. I didn't think about that.
yeah. So it's different. It's different. A lot of things are different. The way you operate, but still being American and having a Western education and all that stuff, that holds a lot of value. So that takes different. And then, sometimes we don't take into consideration just your physical presence, and that helps me with a lot of things too. Um, but here's been good. I love the UAE, and this is just me talking about everything post pre-COVID and everything. UAE is great. I love it. It was felt great for my spirit. If you guys, I told Lee this before, and you're probably familiar with it too, Luke. But I watched a documentary of Miles Davis a while ago,
Yeah.
and I've read Malcolm X books, and I remember both of
Great
them
documentary,
talking
by the
about
way.
yeah, great when they came back from being overseas or anywhere international, and they had to go back to the States, being black, they were upset about it because
Yeah.
now you can't be as free. So like here, I've been free. There's racism everywhere, but the police here don't have guns. Like people don't even move over for a police car. Like they don't really pay
Have you
attention to
asked
that.
that question to the residents there?
Well,
Why
no,
don't
it's
the
different
officers
too,
have
though.
guns?
Well, it's different too because it's an Islamic State, right? So this
For
is run
sure.
off, So the principles, like you talk about Christianity and all those different things, but this country is really based off the principles of the Quran. Like they
Yeah.
really run on those things. They really take care of the people, and you really feel those things. Everybody has issues, but in its core, this is a beautiful place, and it's all about taking care of people. So you definitely feel that in every aspect. So that has been a delight. It's great to see kids be kids. Like you see a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old. They don't have to be like we were when we were 5, 6, 7, 8, to where we have to think like we're 15. So that's great.
Mm.
That's been cool. But as far as being able to handle the situation, right? As far as the oppression and continued lynching of us, I've I probably have a different toolbox than most people, right? So for me, and I went to EMU, right? But I had a really really different experience at our school because I was spoken, but I was also very to my own, so I wasn't a part of any organizations. When I got to grad school, I started teaching and I started taking different courses. So I took courses in our CJP department that's world renowned for different things as far as nonviolent mobilization. I learned about how to deal with trauma personally, so meditation and all those things. Like I had 2.5, 3 years to really deal with that,
Mm-hmm.
while also learning about what it means to start a revolution internationally, what it means to feel what you have to feel and how to deal with that, and how to carry other people's emotions and still manage that as well. But also, I cried enough tears. Like I remember, I was actually teaching a social movements class the day they announced Trump's election. So
Wow.
I was teaching a class because my Deanna was out, so I taught it alone. And I remember it was being a cloudy day, it was rainy, and all the white professors on campus were crying, and all the kids that I had to talk to were just in class, lost and distraught. And I remember saying, "We've been here
If you would have
before.
thought
We
someone
learned the lesson."
died, man, that's
No,
crazy.
it was real, and I remember it
That's
was
how
Trayvon
impactful that
Martin's
was. That's
passing.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, Trayvon Martin passed and Tamir Rice passed and so many people in between. And in that same time, I was reading the ISIS papers. I was reading the Shot to Shakur. You guys know I was reading Malcolm X. I was
Hmm.
reading W. Du Bois, what's in everything.
Double
So I was
country.
reading and learning. I was watching all those things and it was trying to start to make sense. So I learned early that there's levels to everything and there's a role for everybody to play, right? My role isn't going to be taking on that field, that emotional field that's under protesters have, because after that, it's going to be another push, right? So for me, what's been helpful for me is to be reminding my family and the closest ones to me what's really going to get us out of this later,
Yeah.
right? Some of us have skills that need to be used to build economic power. Some of us are healers that need to be making sure we know the purpose of that is to be helping our kids and helping them grow out of things and things like that. So for me, I've probably been more mild mannered and controlled as far as my temper goes with people who are talking out. I don't believe anymore that it's our job to educate white people anymore or anybody that chooses to know. I watch a lot of that going around. We spend a lot of energy doing that. And I don't think it's useful anymore. I think for me, keeping everything in house. right? Because I always say, I was talking to my friend, all of those people who say they didn't know what we were going through or didn't know what we will understand, they all know Martin Luther King. They all know exactly who Rosa Parks is. They all heard of Harriet Tubman. So they all know the stories. And all three of them are from different eras, right? They all know exactly what the story is. They just chose to ignore it because it wasn't in their face. Now it's conveniently there, right? But we've been there before. We told stories. So now for me, how I deal with it is letting my people know, like, take care of yourself here. And let's start build businesses here. Let's start do things here. And let's start doing things within our own. So I've been managing that. That's what also makes it easier for me to stay here and not run back to the States. Because my family and friends know. Like Lee, you know, I've been telling you for a while, look, go do this. Like we gotta just jump out on our own, it's gonna change. So
Yeah.
I find myself and still, educating because knowledge changes everything. So
That's true.
I think in short, knowledge makes it easier for me to deal with all of that.
And you know what I've noticed, man, since being home too, and because you touched on this real quick, Ryan, in regards to, Dr. King, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Doc. So if you guys can also speak to this, those are two prominent African American three figures who I believe that America and media has kind of tainted their struggle a little bit. It's kind of suppressed it. You know what I'm saying? It's not. I was watching. Oh, for sure. I was watching this this cartoon of Harriet Tubman, and because I show my son historic clips, but then he's also 8. So when he was 3, 4 years old, we would watch some of these cartoons, and the perception would be that slavery ended right when Harriet got to the North, and with that being said, everything that embodied slavery has also ended. And it's funny to look at, these stories now, and, I'm showing, and I just showed him the picture with the officer on George Floyd's neck, because it left an imprint on my brain, and I remember what the news looked like during the LA riots.
Right. 92.
I remember what that looked like, right? I didn't understand.
My professor, Jerry, was there.
Oh, was he there?
My professor was documenting that.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So what do you guys think about that, where we're still using the same African American figures to speak for us in our story? Meanwhile, I'm gonna be honest, I'm more Garvey and Malcolm than I'll ever be Martin.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a real interesting. What I'm seeing that's really different for me this time around. This happens all the time and nothing changes, and so I was cynical at first. But there's a couple things that jump out. One, I taught at the master's level a course on diversity for about 14 years. I taught it probably 20 sometimes. And we were talking about systemic racism, institutional racism versus personal racism. And there was a lot of education about white privilege and power and the white gatekeepers of America and all of this. And now, so I would have these little classes of 15 to 30 mass graduate folks, and we'd have really intense and really good conversations, and there was deep learning and deep knowledge, right? And you're introducing the ideas that Juneteenth represents the delayed Emancipation Proclamation in Galveston, Texas, 2 years after slavery ended. You know what I mean? They hadn't got the memo, until they came over and said, oh, by the way, you guys are free, so we talked a lot. What I am impressed with now is that what my daughters are putting on Instagram every single day is probably even deeper than and more, and it's information that's really profound in helping people understand some of the most important things about racism in America that need to be understood. Number one, primarily, white people in general tend to think about racism as being personal. You're racist towards me. That means you could be racist as a black person toward, I'm racist toward you. You're racist toward me. It's how we feel. That's not what black people are talking about. They're talking about the gatekeepers and the systems, whether it's banking, housing, law enforcement, social justice. You can go around to every education. You go around to every, and there is racism built into those, systemically built in to those institutions. And now I think America in general, black and white, are getting this articulated in a way through social media that has never been really in the forefront and up front. It's an education of America that I don't think has happened, at least in my 50 years of living.
Well, white people are right now dealing with this impartial guilt. These
White
younger
guilt.
generations,
White guilt.
Yeah,
right? Where it's like, because let me tell you, the stories of lynching black men and women, ripping families apart, raping our sisters and our aunties and our grandmothers, right? And black or white, those stories are still really tough to digest.
That's right.
Yeah.
And when the rapist, when the murderer looks like you, it's tough. I'm sure of it, right? But the thing is, to play personal is not the safe way to do that. I think starting with, and this is for white counterparts, this message is for you. I think taking awareness and understanding is the only way to go. To understand and to be aware is the only way to go. And then talk to your babies, talk to your children, talk to your younger generation, try to remove that guilt. Let them understand that this is a nasty time in history, but this rollover of other infractions and systematic things in place continues this level of oppression to us.
I think right now what's happening is I feel like white America is learning the difference between a non-racist and an anti-racist, right? A non-racist just says, well, I'm not racist, but an anti-racist wants to do something about it to erase that line of separation. And they work daily and actively to eradicate racism. And that's a big difference. I just saw a post, and I don't know how I felt. I really had to kind of look at it, but there were about 15 to 20 little white kids marching in the suburbs, yelling and screaming, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. They're 5, maybe 4 to age 8. And they've got signs, they're pulling people in the wagons, and they're trying to do something about it, even at that in their own little way. Now, is it a great camera op? Yes. Did it make white mothers cry? Yes. I'm sure all of that. But that hasn't been something that's been happening in the past. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So,
well, Slim, you remember that part of Malcolm X where he's teaching at Harvard real quick, and the young lady goes, "Hey, I'm not like everyone else that's white. What can I do to help?"
Yeah.
Yes.
And what did he say?
Well, you want to know what's funny? So the one thing I've learned here being international is that racism and the white inferiority and what am I saying here? It's international, right? So what I've recognized here is that, of course, we all know that white supremacy is systematic, right? So there's police brutality, but there's also economic problems. There's also colorism. There's a lack of support. Lack of support in any education system. When it comes to healthcare, everything there, right? So here, I've met Afro Arabs, right? So I've met Black Arabs here, and I also see the type of subjects that they're dealing with when it comes to in the stores. Let's just say in the beauty sections, there are actually supplies there to whiten your skin, right? Because that's what this established beauty is, right? So people feel that all here. It's more passive, but it's here. So Ironically, I just had an encounter at a resort last night to where a white guy behind me, maybe from Canada or the UK, was making a black joke. And I turned around and I said something to him about it, and the four white women around and put their head down and didn't want to look up as I talked to him about it. And I went on and I gave him the spiel and kind of let him know what was wrong, what wasn't going to happen. But, in a very aggressive way, because let me be passive. But the one woman who stays and talks is the white woman who's a teacher who says, I do my part. I understand here, right? So what's interesting is that those people always feel like they already know, they've already been doing it, and then they like to tell you when it's the right time to do things based on what they believe, right? Because let's talk about, when we talk about those white parents having to teach their kids, that means they also have to teach them dealing with the feeling that they were doing something wrong, right? So when we worked in the mental health, we were talking about whether a kid could acknowledge the fact that they were doing something wrong or not, right? And a lot of these parents, a lot of these people ignore the feeling of racism and everything that their ancestors have done because it brings about a feeling in them, right? If they don't have that feeling, that's when we start to say that racism is a mental illness or something like that because they can't decipher between the two. So that's something that I've noticed too, is to where, it's international. The oppression is here, imperialism. Like they're trying to go around and build wherever they are.
Imperialism, absolutely.
Yes, they're doing it. So they feel it here. That's another thing that's going to make the battle different. Because the UK is with us, Africa is starting to get with us.
Australia, New Zealand's
they're starting to get with
right
us,
now,
right? And Luke, that even when we had our times in EMU, and you bring over different people who are activists in Africa, they don't necessarily cling to us as Black Americans because the story ends with them when we get on slave ships. They think as soon as we get here, we got everything that was entitled to us, and it goes. So some of those older generation of Africans who didn't know any better, they're not in the forefront anymore. So now the world is getting smaller. I think the first time I realized it would change was during the Arab Springs, and Twitter was the first media source.
They're in Egypt.
Telling everything.
Yeah, in Egypt, in the Arab Spring.
Yeah. And shout out to Paulette because she had us talk to Andy Carvin directly in class during the social media time, to where we talk about the information in the media outlets. They don't control it anymore, right? If you're wrong, and there's you, there's Luke, there's Soph, there's me, there's people who read these things and know it, we're going to correct it, and it's going to go to where it needs to go. So that's another thing that's going to make the change a little bit faster and a little bit more powerful.
You're exactly right. The global
we're all fighting.
society.
We're all fighting.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, with all of us as adults, and we're trying to understand this and get our grasp on everything from pandemic to continued racism, and we've all worked with children. What do you guys feel are the necessary conversations to have? How are we doing wellness checks on our little people who are, in a I would say a social media age here where everything is just being delivered in real time. I do think that there's very low levels of PTSD with some of the stuff that we continue to watch over and over. And I'm gonna start with Soph. How do we mend that? How do we control the development of our youth through what's being kind of pushed through social media, YouTube, Facebook, etc.?
I think it starts with just the personal confidence and their personal understanding of who they are and where their place is in the world. Because as they get older, they'll start to have to understand things on a grand scheme.
Right, because Slim, you're with Black and brown children who are just reading about us.
Man, listen, let me tell you this.
How do you tell that story for us?
Well, first of all, I told you this before, and I'll say this again. Black people are kings and queens, and the rest of the world sees us as royalty, right? And I always say that because of what hip hop has done to cultures. But I've been here, and I've had kids say to me, and I correct them, but I've had kids say to me, "Man, I wish I was a Black American," or "I wish I was this or that." No matter what struggle that they're seeing, they still look at us, and it's something different that shines in our soul. And white people see it. Everybody sees it. That's why we attract so many different things from our music. We talk about people loving our culture, but I think what's most important, and I always do this, is I make sure kids are just being confident in themselves and having real like confidence in what
Right.
they think and how they feel,
Right.
because that's the foundation, right? How are you bold enough to attack these things when you're an adult, right? When you know that who you are is somebody that's loved, somebody that's supposed to be giving love to other people, and to be confident in that, because they see so much so soon that they start to become sponges and take up things, right? But if you're not helping them develop a mind of their own confidence and their own understanding of what true values are, what good morals are, and being able to just follow some sort of faith in themselves. I think that's
So I
what's
guess
most important.
let me pose it in a way that would be beneficial to everyone here. Um, if you had three things that you can give a child to put in their tool bag
Mm,
individually, what would you guys give?
mm,
So, three words came to my mind when the topic of discussion regarding children's mental health came up. And those three things are affirmation,
mhm,
transparency, and empathy. Okay,
Mm.
so I think affirmation, kind of speaking to what Yates was saying, when it comes to, confidence, love yourself,
Mhm.
affirming feelings. It's okay, whether it has to do with race, sexism, um, ableism, affirm them as individuals, affirm them as humans, regardless of what maybe they see as their areas that need improvement, or their areas, I guess, are weaknesses. I don't like using that word, but, affirm, hey, yes, you may not be able to do one thing, but look at all these other things you can do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or, hey, you're a man, but you can still cry.
mhm,
You have these feelings, and I think that's just kind of reaching that core of the individual kind of leads to that empathy part. If you have empathy for yourself, if you give affirmation, it allows forgiveness and empathy to kind of prosper within an individual. And I think then once you can do that with yourself, you can do it with others. So if I can empathize with those who are similar to me, and I have these feelings, and I'm this person with these skills and blah, 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 why does that mean that should I be discriminating against someone else who may not have the same skills as I am, but is still a human, right? So those are kind of the two main things. Like, I know I want my children to receive and show, right? Affirmation and empathy. And then the next thing, I think, when it comes to, caring for children or helping them learn, is just being transparent. If they ask a question, let's not beat around the bush. If someone asks about civil rights or different forms of exceptionalities, explain what's going on. Don't hide it. Don't. I mean, there's always a way to phrase things that's going to be different. I would phrase something different to a 2-year-old than I would to a 17-year-old, but I'm still going to show that same transparency,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only way people are going to learn.
I just think so. So it's really interesting as a parent, you know, of a 26-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 17-year-old. I think right now I'm probably more proud than I've ever been of my children, in the way that without my um, kind of overt teaching of social justice, the way that they have taken the torch and carried the mantle and said, I'm just watching their Instagram posts and I'm blown away. If I would have been able to articulate some of the ideas that they're sharing right now, back when I was that age, I mean, it's just unbelievable to me. And so it makes you feel like, as a parent, that maybe I some of the values weren't taught, but they were caught, because I can't remember like explicitly talking about some of the things that they are so incredibly awakened by right now. And so I'm really proud. The only, when Sophia was in first grade, this is before, this was just beginning the age of litigation. So you couldn't do this today without getting sued. But a teacher did the brown eyes, blue eyes, kind of replicated this brown eyes, blue eyes to talk about discrimination, right? But Sophie, did she use brown eyes and blue eyes, or did she use something else?
No, it was brown eyes, blue eyes.
Yeah,
So
brown eyes.
light eyes and dark eyes kind of thing.
Yeah, and so,
green.
and I got a letter from the teacher at the end of the first day that said, hey, I just want you to know that your daughter, this is as a first grader, did not feel comfortable getting all these privileges because she had light eyes, while those with dark eyes could not go to the water fountain whenever they wanted to, could not go do they had no privileges. She was trying to teach privilege as a first grade teacher, and Sophie had the light eyes, and so she had all these privileges, and the people in the class that had brown eyes, just a replication of this, kind of the seminal study that was done years ago. But anyway, she wrote a letter home to Stacy and I as parents and said, I just want you to know your daughter was very uncomfortable and really wanted to give up her privilege to someone with brown eyes, and she wanted to exchange places so that they could have the privilege and she would not have the privilege. Of course, the next day they switched so everybody could experience it. But, I don't know that I ever taught some of those principles explicitly, but somewhere in her makeup and her disposition, and maybe some things that were caught, through conversations around the dinner table or whatnot, she was ready then to lay her life on the line, so to speak, for somebody else. That empathy, I would say compassion, it's a little deeper than empathy.
Right.
That I'm going to actually do something about, so to put myself in somebody else's shoes, not just feel what they're feeling, but I'm going to do something about it. And so I think the three things that you said, Sophia, really, I think those things are perfect. Like if I could say, yeah, those are the three things that there were times when I wish I would have been more transparent. I grew up in a very religious, conservative upbringing. And what I learned over time is that the church only asks their youth the questions that they have the answers to. And when they get outside of the church as an adult, there's a whole new set of questions that the children have not been prepared for. And for me, as I look back, I go, man, I wish I would have done more to kind of question some of the indoctrination that was taking place through in a religious establishment and ask a different set of questions. Does that make sense? Because I did not prepare my children well for that. But I've gotten fortunate to have the daughters that I have, and they are woke. I mean, they are so awakened right now. It just makes me incredibly proud as a father. So.
But that's the thing too, like to add on to what I was saying by using your words of, I didn't, things weren't taught, they were caught. So I'm not going to just drown my children in my beliefs. I'm still going to leave that space for them to figure things out on their own. However, I'm going to lead by example and pray to whatever higher power there is that they do catch on to those three things, transparency, compassion, empathy, and affirmation, learning and confidence, learning to love themselves and others.
That's huge, man. I can't improve on
Can we
that.
talk more about that? What's not taught, but what's caught, right? As children, all of us, every single
good
one
and
of us
bad.
here,
Good and bad.
We have seen things from our families, good and bad. And I mean, by design, it's who we are as people. It's part of our makeup, what we choose to kind of gravitate to. And I tell you what, my stepdad was a retired NYPD police officer. He is currently. And I always, you know, it was interesting, right? Because he shared stories ever so often about, racism inside the department. But I knew that his beliefs were not of the, of the favored population, and again, these were just things that I wasn't taught. He didn't teach those things to me. I caught them, I caught them
Comment here
in
here.
through conversation, right? I caught them through his feelings, I caught them through, someone being black and being murdered, and what does that look like in the paper, so that was really interesting to me, and I think TV, let me tell you, I do really favor television and movies, for helping grasp and understanding on certain things that I felt elder black folks still were not 100% accepting of. We were still preaching, I'm black and I'm proud when I was born. Today, Black Lives, you know what I'm saying? So there's still a population of elder black folks who do not consider themselves valuable.
The majority,
I would say. Well, I wouldn't say
internalized.
I wouldn't say today the majority. Not today, because today the majority of elder black folks would be you.
Yeah.
And you don't view it like that. But I'm saying in 95, in 95, right? Here it is where the person that's born in 65, they're 30 at that moment. The conversations with their grandparents from the 30s and the 40s, they're just happy to be alive. They're just, grateful for survival. But to be bold and black, there were black folks that looked at us, as a younger generation as, oh, y'all fierce. Are y'all sure that's smart to have that approach?
Something.
Yeah, right. And it was weird.
Yeah.
So
that's conditioning.
So
So Ryan, when you were growing up, did your parents? So I'm really curious. Did your parents preach a lot of black pride, or was there a sense of internalized oppression where they felt like inferior to other, or what? Because you come across very confident, very knowledgeable. What was your experience like with that?
Yeah, I'll always say this. I get my grace from my mother. Like my mother's a gangster. She can't. She's one of 8.
Okay.
And she's the second youngest of the 8, and is a woman. So she comes from a small town called Victoria, Virginia. It's right around Petersburg area. So she came out what we call the mud, and she came to DC on her own. She was in a relationship with my father, but my father was in a mix with some shiesty stuff during the Rayful Edmond time, and she ended up divorcing him early. And she raised me and my brother alone, and my brother has a different father. She raised us alone. His father's still around, but my mom was different. I was in basketball early, so that helped. That helped me get an identity of some sort, which is why basketball, for me, a whole nother conversation is how predatory a lot of coaches are, not understanding how much of a coping skill and a tool basketball really is for us. And so how sometimes, or football or whatever, athletics or any type of art, so sometimes when we don't make it successful, they really do us a disservice because they haven't prepared us for anything else. Right. Because they don't understand that they have to do that because not other people doing that. But for me, my mom was a gangster because my mom, she allowed certain people in to help raise me as well, right? So I have, my father wasn't around, and I didn't really have an absence of a father present, but I had 2 really, really strong black men around who and again, who I say my aunt, the black women have been the most important for me. Traditionally, the black women were really strong. They
the matriarch,
always,
absolutely.
They're pushing me up. And the OGs that I have, they remind me that my strength comes from them. So they're the ones pushing it there. So
isn't that telling, Slim? Isn't that telling, man? Doc, you asked about confidence, man, and
yeah.
me like you, the the groundkeepers, the foundation, is of a black woman solely.
The mother.
Yes.
From my great
Yes.
grandmother to my grandmother to my aunts to my mom, the examples of leadership and greatness
Yes.
I've seen from black men in my family, but it
Yes.
started with my mom.
Yes.
So
Strength.
I want to big that up to all
Yeah.
the moms, my
That's-
mom, your
that's
moms, every
Yeah.
mom,
It's amazing.
black and white. Well, it's a maternal thing too, man.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah, I mean,
families, right?
It's
Moms
there,
are the
but
glue.
I think also what helps me is being from Alexandria, Virginia, right?
Mhm.
So everybody knows that's like the Remember the Titans movie. So there's a lot of history already there. There are a lot of black families seated there, and what the community that I grew up in, it was never a second thought that we were second class citizens, and that's even with, my school had 3,000 people there, students, bigger than a college, and we had governors' kids, we had all those rich white kids in the same thing, but they always wanted to be us. They wanted to be a part of where we were. So it was never a thought that we were second class citizens. And then when you're a kid, you don't know you're struggling or you're poor or whatever, anything of that is. So my mom never let me think that. And she always had me in a book of somewhere. So we talk about those three words that I'm going to make sure I instill in my niece, because I'm not having any children anytime soon. But if I instill in my niece,
It's coming.
but not relax, relax, baby,
coming.
relax. But for me, it's about it's gonna be about love, and that's loving yourself first. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm truly understanding that. When you love yourself, you can project that, and people feel it. We talk about confidence and things like that. Sometimes confidence is unspoken. So my mom is one that told me, she taught me from watching, is like, if you're really somebody that you say you are, and it's true, you don't have to speak it, people will feel it, right? And so I think that changes things too. And then knowledge is important, right? My mom always said if she didn't know something, she gave me the book to find it, right? And as a youngin', I hated that, like, whatever, I'm gonna go hoop. But now, I find myself reading a lot, and because I do more reading than some of my friends and peers, I share that information, so that makes it easier. And then resilience too. So my mom always made
You
sure.
internalize it when you share it. It's like the
Yeah.
best way to learn is to teach, right? I mean,
Exactly. So
Hey,
you really start to practice. So those things are important.
So let me ask you guys something, as we all, and I've heard it from each one of you: affirmation, confidence, building children during these developmental stages. As all of us, I am hip hop culture,
Absolutely.
through and all the way through. And when we talk about affirmation, we talk about confidence, I would be lying to you if I said that Nas doesn't hold a huge part, or Biggie Smalls or Jay-Z don't hold huge parts in my development and positive affirmation, and closing my eyes and being able to look out and see all the things that I can obtain.
For sure.
But then there's also there's also and we touched on it real quick, so before, in regards to entertainment versus the art, and also understanding that, right? And a buddy of mine said to me years ago, he said, look, man, when those albums were made, they weren't made for you at 11. They were made for the artist's peers. And that really stuck to me.
that's interesting.
And it's now concerning in regards to my son and, what I listen to. And it's a wide range of things that I listen to, but I love everything from trap rap to, overly sexualized music to, positive to a lot of cursing. I am a fan of it all because I understand the art. What does it look like for young people where that line is blurred?
So I think, this is really
what do we do with our music and our art, guys?
No, I think this is really interesting because, Lee, and if I could go back, I'd do some things a little differently, because I used to just try to completely separate my kids early on from any of that type of music, right? And looking back, I wish I wouldn't have done that, because I think, again, putting their heads in the sand is not the way to go. I think what you do though is you talk about it and even if it's derogatory or even if it's exploiting, talk about the exploitation. Talk about what's wrong with it. Talk about this is a great beat, but listen to these lyrics. This I can't defend this song because it's just nasty, but talk to them about it as opposed to this song that's talking about your society and the culture and what's really happening. I think you use it as a tool for learning instead of to stick their heads in the sand and go, just ignore it until you're an adult and then you can experience it as you will.
The parental piece that you speak on, I got to speak for myself, Slim and Soph, in this regard, that before my mother even gave me the approval, I had it in the tuck.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Before she even gave a thumbs up on Big Willie style, I had, the 36 chambers.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. The first album my mom bought me, because she just said F it, was Get Rich or Die Trying. She was
Wow.
like,
Get Rich or Die Trying?
Anyway. Yeah, she said you're gonna go get it anyway. So I'm cranking 50, but we always have balance. My mom is heavy gospel and all the old school. So
Fred Hammond.
Even if I was no, I'm talking about further
CeCe Winans.
Mahalia.
Like Canton Spirituals. Lee Williams, deep. Like we watching the video, so she
the
gave
Mississippi children of the choir or whatever. Yeah, I got you.
Chicago Boys
Parents
Choir.
Parents got to remember we don't learn nothing from you, not as much as you think. We learn from the streets.
After age 14, the number one influencer in a child's life is their peers. After age 14,
that age is probably lower now.
Yeah, now it's probably like 12, 11.
Right. So what do you guys
if you're
do?
if you're a black kid in America, though, it's probably like 9 to 8.
That's probably true too. Absolutely.
I remember driving. We were in a 22-hour car ride to Kansas, and Sarah was maybe like 7 or 8, and she was I could hear the music coming out of her headphones, and it was "Bees in the Trap" by Nicki Minaj. And I remember Serena and I just completely like losing it, because if we were that age listening to something with that much profanity and just the message, like we probably would have been grounded because of what happened. It was Bees in the Trap. She's 7 years old. She's rapping.
I've got a video where you guys are going to the window.
Oh, I was in 6th grade.
I'm like, okay, come on, man.
Yeah. But this is me. I'm gonna come in with the cape here for the culture, because I know Lee and I argue about this stuff all the time. Because even though he's close enough in age, he's still extremely old school when it comes to the music.
Absolutely,
very much. So I would say, one, as people in our community, we've only always had our celebrities in the art or sports to hold up, right? I think that's going to change more. It's going to be more diversified as we start to get more writers. We start to get more artists, and we start to get more fashion designers and things coming. Yes. But in terms of music, J. Cole has always spoken. Beyonce is, her Coachella performance has always been there. Hov does what he does. Jay Electronica came out. And even now, Lil Baby is making his stance. But with music now versus what it was before, you can find what you want. You can dictate it. You know what I'm saying? You know where to go to find the Dreamville, the Jids. You know where to find a Nick Grant. You know where to go to find everything. The Monday Nights. You know where to go to find that to kind of offset what is going on here. You know where to find a Tierra Wax. And because of the golden era that you grew up in, you were raised in, and that you already understood, you know what to come out of there with the KRS-One and the Public Enemies and the death certificate.
Look, we had a group called
you know what I'm saying? Like we know how the balance is. Yeah. And our right now, like our music always reflects our culture, right? Like, so when things change, and of course the corporations have whitewashed our music, and they've started to dictate who becomes our artists at the beginning, or at the forefront. But that's changing still, right? So now the time is where it is. Because we've paid attention in the last 3 years or so, our artists have been working to get back the rights to their music. They've been working to become more independent. And when that happens, the music starts to become more reflective of the time. Because that's why hip hop was brought about anyway, right?
Right.
Because it was able to
There's
express
an
our
expression.
political
Right.
concerns and
That's
do
right.
whatever it is that we wanted to do in our community. So, I don't think there's nothing to worry about. If anything, the kids that
Now
are
I'm a
growing
little
up
worried, man. I'm a little
within
worried.
this space, about what? Will you ever worry about Manson?
Nah,
Will you ever worry
huh?
about Kiss? You think
Nah,
they
because I
wouldn't
didn't
worry
listen
about
to none of
Elvis
them
and them?
fools. I never
Right.
listened to those guys.
Well,
But
They were
when I
millions
say I'm
plus. Why
worried,
we gotta be
no,
worried?
no, no. When I'm saying I'm worried, I'm speaking as a parent. I'm worried in regards to the accessibility to the music. We're not
Lee,
talking about the No,
Lee.
I'm listening because here's the
You
thing.
grew up in New
Even when
York,
I
Lee.
had 30, no facts. But even when I had 36 chambers, bro, it was on a TDK, 90 minute flip side.
Yeah,
That's an
yeah.
easy detect. But we're talking
Right.
about going to YouTube, searching something, and hitting a sneak on it and hearing the stuff,
But why he
right?
gotta sneak it, right? That's what the question is now, is
Well, he
why he
better
gotta
sneak
sneak
it
it.
because I don't approve of him listening to that solely.
But if you know for sure that you can't block it anyway, and that even if you try to block it and he's gonna leave,
you
who do
better
you want to
use it as a.
explain who do you want to explain that to him work? Like who in the Virginia area where you are is going to be able to explain the breakdown of the lyrics, why it doesn't
Well,
make sense,
Yeah,
how
you
it
better
it's
doesn't
use
make
not
it as
so
a
sense.
much.
Thank
learning
you.
tool.
Well,
You
no,
better
no,
use
no.
it
It's
as a
not.
learning
It's
tool.
not. It's not so much him sneaking it, right? So the thing is, I remember he was 4, and we were driving, and my dad. I'm gonna say it was funny. Me, my dad, and my son in the car one Thanksgiving, and a song came on, and my dad goes, "Hey, you got to turn that off. That's a lot of cursing." And I thought it was the most blasphemous thing that I've
Like
ever heard him
ironic,
say,
right?
because I said we were just playing Chronic 2001 like the entire road trip,
Mm-hmm.
and if you guys know Dre, I mean, but again, I think because we were children of the times, right?
Yeah.
The reality matched the music, guys. So it wasn't too hard
But
to
doesn't
have that conversation. Back then it did.
but
Back
doesn't it
then,
feel like listen,
no, 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 no.
no, no,
Right
no.
now,
When I
when I
talk
have
about what's
18-year-olds
taboo,
talking about, huh?
no, I used to do this exercise in these graduate classes, and I'd say, I want you to think back to your senior year. And I had them talk about, who the heroes and heroines were, the scientific discoveries, and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, and also talk about what was taboo. And the people that graduated in the 50s, they had a ton of things that were taboo that you didn't. Divorce was taboo.
Well, this was the
Church
biggest
on
difference.
Sunday was taboo. Now my millennials over here in the conversation, nothing's taboo. Like everything
Well,
reflects the reality.
what I'm saying
Gayness,
is
whatever.
no. So back then the difference was that this was his CD. He was playing it in his car for his children. This was not me in the space of my parents and my CD player playing this stuff at an early age.
Right.
Now, when I hit 13, 12 years old, I started my own collection of music. But I already had 5 years prior to that to have an understanding of what does a industry, they call it today, an industry plant look like, right? Or what is what I'm saying?
I
What's the
think you talking
what?
about the colored hair dude. The
Well,
colored
no,
hair
no,
dude
no,
that comes to
no,
mind too.
no.
Well,
I'm just speaking on the fact that and I guess this is my fear as a parent of an 8-year-old. The accessibility to music without having the proper conversation around it.
So have them. You have the knowledge.
No, I know
You know?
we do have them, but
Sure.
I'm saying in the moments when they go and they look at the stuff themselves. Now, all I say to my son, and to counter any of that, is, hey, if you have questions, come,
yeah.
let's talk,
I
right?
think one of the things that I was told, one of my best coaches ever, he coaches at Providence now. I think he might have wrote a book on this too. Adults don't give kids enough credit for what they understand, right? So you're talking about, just think about evolution on its own, right? Right? Like each generation of kids, animals, or whatever, they come equipped with better tools, right? Early understanding of things, right? What makes you think because you couldn't understand it at 8 that he won't be able to understand it at 8 when he's in a world to where when he was 2 or 3, the stimulus was there. He was learning more. He was learning things faster, right? And you don't
No,
want to. You're
factual.
not going to be.
That's just the
You're not
dad
going
in
to
me,
be
bro.
able to. No, for sure, for sure. But you gotta like you're not going to be able to cut him off from anything because the
Well,
world is
y'all know
out
I
there.
sit here
You
and
know what
put
I'm saying?
mixes together, so I never
Exactly. So he's
my goal
already
is to
trained.
never
He's
cut
ready to
him
go.
off. No, he's very knowledgeable, right? It's when they think they understand the music, so they don't need the conversation. And
So
that
Yeah.
and I remember when I actually see when Reasonable Doubt came out in '96 versus me listening to it again in 2001. It was very different those 5 years in between because I'm at a point where I can sit with myself and play something back and listen to it again and play something back and listen to the cadence and listen to the delivery and listen to the conviction in the artist, right? I can understand that. But I also had people in my family that I can go to and have conversations about. So I just, that's where I'm at with my little one. It's just like, bro, I don't even, I care what you listen to, but if you don't understand something, please, let's just have the conversation. Because that's so.
I feel like, so in that situation, say Lil Man comes out rapping, I know, because I know he learns every single lyric to every song that he hears, and he might only need to hear it like 1.5 times. And
the song right now is Time Flies by Drake.
Like, he knows everything. And that's the thing is, let him learn it, right? He's going to come out, and maybe he'll start rapping about sex and drugs and money. Maybe. But that's when it's say, hey, do you know what you're talking about? Then you bring the conversation to him of like, hey, let's, maybe not rap these lyrics at school, and this is why. Like, this is now, let's have the conversation. So it's kind of allowing that room. It's not, everyone's going to have that fear, of making mistakes or their children making mistakes, and you want to protect them from everything, but you can't. And I think that's where that transparency and trust and confidence comes in, is letting them come to you. So they're going to come out, they're confident, they know all the lyrics, and you're like, hey, great skill. Now this is what it means. So maybe you can limit what you're saying, or
in the church.
let's now know what you're talking about. You can know the lyrics, but let's just, as long as you know them already, I can't take that away from you.
And let's talk about
where I tell you what,
let's not
there was
rap
something
in the
that
library,
we did.
the church, the school.
I had him over the a couple months ago. We sat and we watched the Time is Illmatic, the Nas documentary. And this kid was talking about the world is yours at 3. So it wasn't, I'm that dad where it's like, oh, that song is cool, but have you heard Keep Your Head Up? Remember that song that I played for you several years ago? Here, let's listen to that, right? Let's listen to, like we listened to a children's story by Slick Rick.
Yeah.
And
you
it
like
was
MC
funny.
Hammer too, man.
I do like Hammer. Let me tell you something, and I'm going to get to Hammer in a second. Don't even front.
Nah,
don't
no, leave that Hammer.
I will
no.
get
Respect
my Hammer back.
Let him go.
So we were listening to a children's story. You guys know the record Slick Rick, right?
Yeah.
And it was just insightful, man, to sit there and to watch his wheels turning as he's like, yo, so dude is really like spitting the story right now. Like it was here we are at 10 o'clock at night on a school night, and we're listening to the story.
Another and a sister and a brother. That's what you're talking
about.
But
here's the thing: when I listen to the Great Adventures of Slick Rick, I listen to the Slick Rick is just as important as Mark Twain in my world.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great quote.
Slick Rick is our Mark Twain. So exposing him to that and watching him understand it versus what it looked like at 4 years old, where he didn't, but now he has his own little song choices. He has his own, the We Bear Bears, and they have their own soundtrack, and he's on the hoverboard. And I don't know, I'm going through something here in the house, man. But it's interesting.
You're getting old, man. Stop trying to block the creativity, man. We can't get the new without the current.
I'm not blocking it. I'm not blocking it. I'm
Play
just
him your
making
first
sure
rhyme.
that it's safe.
Yeah,
So-
play
Just
him
making
your
sure that
first
it's safe.
I
rhyme.
was wondering,
My first rap name was Gizmo. Like, it was terrible, and I had raps in a green folder,
oh,
and they had no cursing. Yeah, Gizmo, Gizmo.
I always wondered
Yeah.
about my daughters when we would travel, and their favorite song was the Spice Girls song. I tell
No,
you
don't do this to them. Don't
what
do
I
this
really,
Spice
really
Girls,
want.
man.
I wanna, and I'm like zigga zig zag. And I was like, what are they? But they didn't comprehend it at that developmental stage of their life, like I was comprehending
Just
it
got it now.
with Posh Spice and Scary Spice. You know what I mean? Now they
Oh,
know.
man.
But let me ask you guys, as young men and women, right? Especially the three of us.
Right.
Luke, you kind of came in, this thing was brewing. I would say you're more Prince, the
Listen, absolutely.
over sexualization of music.
Yes.
Right? So let me tell you, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you that Around the Way Girls,
Yeah.
that Back That Ass Up, did
Right
not
there. I like
alter.
right there.
It altered how I viewed
Yes.
women in moments. Not,
Yes.
but I'm saying
Absolutely.
14, 15,
Hold
it
on,
did
hold
play
on,
a
Lee.
part.
Hold on, Lee. Hold on. See, this is what I'm not gonna let you do. I'm not gonna let
What?
you put that on hip hop and what you were listening to, because hip hop album, that song was 4 minutes, man. And you were
What, Back
in
That
New
Ass Up?
York, Queens, right? You Queens, right?
Are you
But
talking
as
about
much
Back
as the
That Ass
music
Up?
went,
You
man,
can't
any of
defend
those songs.
Only because I'm saying the
yo,
first 4 bars of that
no, cool.
Are you serious?
But you won't playing that when you outside on the block and you was
No,
chasing
but
after
my
whatever.
first party in Albany Projects.
Party, cool. We all got the
Listen,
parties, but you
you
don't
found
put
a
hip hop
wall
on there.
and you jumped on it. And I'm telling
That's
you,
a moment. That's a moment. But don't do that to
yes,
hip hop. Don't
it's
put.
crucial at
That's
15.
what media does, though. That's what the media does. They
And
put
that's
hip
No,
it.
I
hop
gotta
to blame
put it
for
on hip
everything.
hop because I am of hip hop.
It's,
Like
no,
it is on hip hop.
it ain't on hip hop because the streets of New York was the streets of New York, and you were
And
in
the
Queens.
streets of New York
And
was playing everything. Hip hop is my life.
for
So
sure.
everything, whether it's relationships, education, smoking weed, whatever it is, I'm pairing it to hip hop because that's where I got the elements from.
You
And again,
compare it,
it
but don't
channeled through
attribute
my
it to it.
reality.
So
Oh,
is this,
why not? I'm a product of it.
Let's talk.
but is this what you're scared for Langston? Of him,
Well,
so if he's hearing Back That Ass Up, if he's
Your
going
son.
to then think of women a certain way, because again, that's where the
not-
conversation comes in. Hey,
I'm not scared for it. I'm not scared for it. The thing is that I remember how hard I had to work at 8 or 9 to hear certain material, right? And I'm just saying now the accessibility, just picture, guys, that's what I'm saying, is 20-something years ago, if you had Spotify, if you had Tidal, if you had YouTube, we all had video games. Yeah,
No, Lee.
when did
No.
you get your own TV with your video
Lee.
game?
Tell me what a day was like when you was outside on the block running around with your guys at 8 or 9. Regardless of how hard it was for you to find anything, what was the day like for you to outside?
That's what it was.
Yeah. No, but
Protecting
outside of the music, what did you see on the street? What did you see on the street? That's more influential than what you were listening to, because that's just a reflection
but that's
of
why
the
I
music.
started, guys, and I said that the music, it was easy to have the conversation because it spoke to the reality that we were sitting in.
Exactly. So
And my
whatever
son
Langston,
doesn't sit in that reality. He doesn't sit in
so,
guys just
so that's
putting
what
Billy Dutches across the street. Like, he doesn't sit there.
cool, and that's why it makes sense to where it's going to be easier to have those conversations, and it's going to be easier for him to decipher it, because more of the time that he spend of his life not listening to music will be something completely different, right?
he
And
won't
when it comes
understand
back
what is going on the street.
yeah, it's
You
different.
know, it's still that educational piece of, yes, you're not living this life, but someone is.
Yeah.
And so you
I
need
can't. It's hard to defend to the window, to the wall.
to sweat drop down my balls.
Hey,
Right?
I can.
Well, then,
man,
at that
but
point,
listen,
it's like, this
when
is
that
what
was
dance. This is what it means.
cool,
It might be offensive, but it's a good
yeah.
song.
And when
Well,
and went to the window, you still had All Falls Down. You still had Kanye and the
well,
street
no,
there.
and you know what? To that point,
So don't do that, because even when you
no,
guys
no.
had a 2 Live Crew and all the other
Yeah,
stuff,
like,
you
No, for
had
yeah,
sure.
I used to play.
All
That's
right, but
right.
even
Like,
when they've
we
had,
all
even
lined
when
up
they
on
had
the
2 Live
foul
Crew,
line,
bro,
right?
when 2 Live Crew was out,
Mm-mm.
it
On
was
the loop.
so. And here's how I'm gonna present this, Slim. So 106 in Park. I'm gonna just go right there. 106 in Park and TRL were shows of the youth. They were
Yes.
put together after school, and
Yes.
they were purposely made to introduce new music to a
MTV
younger audience.
Mhm.
And
Right.
when and to Doc's point, to where Get Low is the number one video on 106 in Park.
Yeah.
What is it saying in regards
Let's
to our security and kind of keeping the artistic value and derogatory quote unquote music to where it only falls on adult ears?
who's Mr. 106 in Park? Could you tell me that? Who's Mr. 106 in Park?
I think it's Trey Songz.
No, it's Bow Wow, right? You just talked about how it was
Okay.
directed towards the kids, and the majority of what the kids was getting was Bow Wow, was getting B2K, they was
Romeo.
getting little Romeo,
But look at all right,
and still
were
Talib
they
Kweli made
not
appearances.
sexualized? Were they not sexualized? Was B2K
Well,
not an overly sexualized group?
I know where you're heading with this, but that's not what
Bum
we're talking
bum
about.
bum.
No, but that's cool, but you still had
I can go
Bow
there.
Wow. Bow Wow was Mr. 106 in Park. That was a people's champ. That's what that was. His
They
music
even
wasn't
threw
that.
Big Butt Girls in Bow Wow's video at 10.
Man,
He
what
didn't
were you
have little
seeing
girls
out?
in the video.
I just want you to stop neglecting what you're seeing outside on the block. That's actually
No, for
reflecting all
sure.
that, man.
But
You know
see,
what I'm
because
saying?
the thing is, it's like this, bro. When I was coming up, my older sister, her room was full of right on pictures of Monica, Brandy, Usher. You know, mind you, this is nice and slow Usher. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying that when we talk about it was, and you guys are right, it was easier to have the conversation then when the music was able to be controlled and how we were
Man,
giving it to
hold
the
on.
youth.
Marvin Gaye,
Yeah.
let's get it on.
Yeah.
Marvin was a
Sexual
But
sex
that
healing.
was
symbol.
not, yeah,
Teddy
but you wasn't
Pendergrass,
listening to that at
Teddy
9.
Pendergrass. But you're talking about generational stuff.
Pow.
Teddy
Was
P.
that our tranny segment? Was that our transgender segue?
No, don't do
Teddy
that.
P?
Teddy P, the legend. Teddy P won't in
Hey.
there.
I
But
thought you were
let me
going there.
know that.
Oh.
Hey, listen.
No. Teddy P, the legend,
Look.
man.
We're running short on time. Let me just say a couple
Yeah.
things. One, first of all,
Yeah.
I just want to pay my respects to Nipsey Hussle. I'm sorry, Yates. He looks like Nipsey to me. So
No, listen, man. Lee
Why
knows
do you do that?
that's
He
my
does
guy,
not
man.
look like. He does not
I
look
don't.
like.
I don't.
but anyway,
though.
no, I'm so glad
Rest in
to
peace,
see you,
Nip.
Ryan. I gotta say that some of the things we did not discuss that are out there
No, we
right
got to talk about the transgenders and Trump real quick, and then we're
now.
done.
Hold on. Tulsa, you know, the
Yes,
massacre
yes,
of Tulsa
absolutely.
and Trump, you know, trying to turn it.
I think he was talking so vigorously that he cut himself off.
He said the T
About to
word
come
too
back
many
on.
times. He said Trump too many times.
Yeah, before we get off, I do, Soph, if you can kind of speak to what's been going on in the LGBTQ community and our illustrious President Trump. You know, if we can kind of just, because I don't want to. That's been in my feed the last couple of days, and yeah, I'll let you take the lead on that.
Yeah, so there are two things that Trump has done this week, probably in the past like 2 days, that have completely just outraged everyone. And if people aren't outraged, then they can just never speak to me again. So number one is that I'll speak on what Dad was saying for a second, and then I'll get to the LGBTQ community outcry. So Trump, of course, has decided in all places to hold his rally, to have it in Tulsa, Oklahoma. On Juneteenth, he's now changing it because he said, I think, and I partially quote, you know, my Black friends raised the awareness that this is a holiday for them. Well, no shit. But what
Wow, man.
friends do you have also? But so yeah, so just regarding everything that happened in the 1920s, Trump decided to go ahead and make that his first rally back, Tulsa, Juneteenth. But the second and most recent ordeal is that he has now taken away rights for transgender individuals in the healthcare system, meaning, so if a transgender man or woman comes into a healthcare facility, the doctors, or one example that I can easily speak to is, if they're looking to have the actual transitional surgery, they can be denied because it's the healthcare provider just does not believe in that process. Therefore, they're not going to do it, regardless of their human rights or their transgender rights, any rights at all. They can just be shut down. It's basically just taking away human rights from those who are looking to transition. And it's completely insensitive. I mean, if you're going to work in healthcare and deny rights to any individual, no matter what, then you should not be working in that field. It is not a healthcare provider if you cannot provide healthcare to anyone and everyone.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, that's yeah, I'm sorry.
I think that's another symptom of the disease of systematic oppression, right?
Mm-hmm.
To where now they can control another institution, right? And that institution abides by the rules or whatever the white supremacist says. I just don't want the fight to be separated. I think what's easier for them to manage is if there's a Black trans fight and then there's also a Black lives fight, and
Right.
not all of us together, right? Because again, we're fighting for just basic human rights. We're not fighting for anything that's outlandish, just basic human rights. And that fight that they're fighting, that's inclusive. That's included in the fight that we're fighting for every individual. So I hope, and I know my personal experience and with the friends that I have that are helping in that fight as well, they know my support is there in any way possible. But just don't let them start to divide, because they've done that before, taking their attention one way because they feel like we don't support this or that, but making sure that the fight is still inclusive and we're still unified. And I've been seeing that with many leaders from the movement. But I mean, Trump is who Trump is, right? So, no surprise there, but we got to make sure we stay resilient and unified for sure.
Yeah, Black, to piggyback off what Slim is saying, I solely believe that Black Lives Matter is all inclusive.
Yes.
Every walking and breathing Black life, I don't care if it's biracial, gay, straight, trans, bisexual, midget, tall, whatever, overseas, disabled. Yes, exactly. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So it needs to be all inclusive. It's everyone combined in this fight. I think even our white counterparts, as Doc said earlier, are now a part of this because, and this was a piece that I was going to ask you guys. For the interracial couples, for the biracial children, and this is why
I have
I'll tell you what,
for you too, Lee.
Yeah, for sure. Social media, man. I guess this is the parent in me. It kind of slowly comes out because I go through these comments, man, and there's so much hate that these people are spewing. And as you said, Ryan, it's a constant divide. People are seriously just trying to split us all up. And that's not really your fight. You're only 50%, or you're married in, or some other silliness. But Black Lives Matter means every single one of us, because like I said before, this country is built on the backs of Black lives and Black people. So the first thing that it needs to do is recognize that we matter as a huge population.
Preparation.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that, and I'm sorry, I either my computer died or crashed or something, so I'm on my phone now because
We think you said Trump too many times.
I couldn't go out.
Yeah.
They going out like sucking like that. So, but it's really interesting. This whole thing, you know, the national soccer team all decided to take a knee during the national anthem here recently or something, and then Trump retweeted some congressman's tweet, and then he added, "I'm not going to be watching football if they're going to be taking a knee." You know what I mean? And so this is going to get interesting with
what's one less viewer.
The knee is longer about disrespect to the flag, disrespect. It comes back to Kaepernick. You know what I mean? Like this is now the knee becomes much more relevant, and I think it's going to have much more support during the national anthem. I used to tell my daughters, yeah, you can stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance in school, but you can't say the last line. Do not say the last line in Justice for All. I wouldn't let them. I used to tell them, don't say it, because we don't have justice for all. And I'd say, we can say it once we have justice for all. That's when they were first grade, second grade, third grade. I'd tell them, you can't say the last line. And this is going to get really interesting right now with these political statements taking a knee. It means something completely different. But Trump still sees it as, he is just not even attempting to be, to demonstrate learning and knowledge. And that's frightening to me. That's frightening to me.
I just have never had so many ill words to like say or think about a human. And like for me, like I like to think of myself as compassionate and understanding and, you know, trying to give some room for growth. But at this point, it's just kind of like, no.
Yeah.
Like
my dad,
so insensitive.
My dad, the pastor of all these years, sent me a letter. I just got a letter in the mail, like old school letter, right? And you know, of course, he's worried about my faith and my salvation and the, things as a Christian minister. But the one thing he said, even Donald Trump deserves forgiveness, you know. And I thought that was a really interesting line. I heard a sermon. One of the best I heard one time was, what would Jesus think of Dennis Rodman? Or what would Jesus say to Dennis Rodman back when he was, going through all that craziness, right? And so
I'm not mistaken, was Jesus persecuted by his government?
Jesus was persecuted by his government.
I believe the bag you getting in, Slim? Go ahead, get in your bag.
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. Well,
absolutely.
I think for me, I think Trump did us. I don't want to say a favor. I don't want to give him credit for this, but I think I appreciate the symbol that Obama was for us, but he was just that, a symbol. I think he sold us on faith, and not because I don't know. That's a hope. Yeah, hope. That's more so hope, not faith. Because hope is empty. But what I think this does is in this time, and I think it's a combination of COVID-19 causing everybody to sit still and stop the rat race. So now you can't ignore whatever problems you had before, or you can't ignore what really matters, right? Because at the end of the day, the money doesn't mean anything, So I think because we had to stop from the rat race, and then now we get to see everything so clear, and there's no like gray area with Trump, right? Yeah. We're not sitting here looking at him as like, well, he's doing this on one side, but he's not doing this for the other. It's all there, right? So what's left for us now is to make something happen, to make something change. And it's something that people are seeing internationally too. So I think here, if anything, this might be one of those biggest turning points, right? It's like climax in our existence as humans, to where we take, for our generation, the generation after us, and older generation, when we take the world next, it's really going to be based upon us. Like, what excuse do you have not to support Envision? right?
Yeah.
What excuse do you have not to say the police department and the way policing is done needs to be abolished completely? We need to completely look at education differently. Like, what excuse do we have? And we know that there's no issue with time. Time is nothing. Like, we need to make changes now, right?
Yeah.
And we can't do that. So it's kind of it's tough to go through, right? But chaos and change begin the same way. So it's going to be difficult, but
Well,
that's about how it goes.
I think about the civil rights, and it was a
Yes.
youth movement. It was a youth movement. It really
It was a
was.
long time. Yes, it was.
And now, the other day, my youngest at 17, 18, getting ready to go off to college, she looked at me and she said, Dad, she said, I know us millennials, we take a lot of, Generation Z or whatever. She says, I know that people don't say very nice things about us. They don't think we're very responsible, et cetera, but they're messing with the wrong generation when it comes to this. You will hear all this, and she has just been on fire. Of course, Sophia, you're on fire.
Love it.
Mhm.
It is. They said, no, you underestimated this generation, And
Absolutely.
I can just say, man, I am so grateful for these young people that are trying to teach these old dogs some new tricks about systemic racism and institutional racism and power and privilege and a history of, white guilt is not stopping them from having conversations. And I'm very, very just proud of this generation right now. So,
Yeah.
All right, folks, I think we're going to wrap it up. We'll do some final thoughts. I definitely want to thank Ryan for joining us.
yes.
Your perspective is loved and appreciated, brother. You be safe. Wish me a
Thank you.
lot.
Just know I'm drinking. Yes, I'm doing a lot. I'm drinking, and I can't even say that now. Listen, I was drinking because it was late. It's like it's almost 2:00 in the morning here right now. But
That's amazing.
That's a nice disclaimer.
We were drinking and it's like 5, so.
Yeah. It's late. I had to make sure I say that. But thank you guys. I'll have a podcast coming soon in a little bit.
So we
you guys,
100%, man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to say happy Pride Month.
Yes.
Especially because with everything going on, we stand with you, we hear you, we love you.
Yes.
I mean, like Ryan said, everything that's going on is about systemic oppression. And it's not just about, like, the Black Lives Matter movement is about much more than just
intersectionality. Absolutely.
Yeah. So wanted to put that out there.
It's good.
All right, don't forget, next week, Saturday. Right. Well, this week, Saturday, watch party, 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Going live, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Yesterday, we did some touring through the center, and it's coming along beautifully. So let's just please spread the word.
Envision, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And the last thing I want to say is, Lee, don't stop. Don't stop. No matter how hard.
Well, you'll have to kill me for me to stop, brother. Yeah.
Listen, man. The one thing I've learned is, as many hours as you put in for where you work and everything else, if you do that to your own personal dreams, the benefits and the rewards are infinite. The worst thing that could ever happen to us is that we start over. That's it. And from there, we start over with a better understanding. So,
absolutely,
do it, man. Do it. That's where your heart lies. Is big, So, I support. Whenever I get home or get a chance to, I'm gonna show up. So, don't stop, man. Make it happen. I believe.
If you ever come back, I don't think you're ever gonna come back.
Listen.
I say that. I always say
you,
that to you. You're gonna have a family in Abu Dhabi, and we'll have
listen, relax. But I do say this, that I always said that I was gonna have an international home and that I wasn't gonna stay in the States for too long, like maybe 6 months out.
Slim, Fred, not. I got a whole thing coming right now just to visit.
I'm taking my family with me. I'm taking my family with me though. So I'm working.
Ryan,
I got a plan. I got a plan.
I texted you not too long ago about those international school jobs. So just hit me up. You gotta send me text on WhatsApp because I have a UAE phone number. I got you. I'll go through WhatsApp. I got it. I'm good.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I got some plans. We'll speak about them later, but
All right.
I'll
Word.
definitely be back, man. I'll
You're the
definitely be
man.
back. I'm gonna establish a few businesses at home before I leave again, because I'm definitely gonna be gone.
That's good stuff. All right.
All right,
Peace.
family.
Love.
Much love
Happiness.
to y'all. Be
All right.
safe.
Bye.